Welcome back. We're still watching Daybreak on this 31st day of October 2023. I still have Senator Ledamo Lekina from Narok County. We have Brian Olang from KHLC and Nelson Koech from the Foreign Relations Committee at the National Assembly. And like I told you earlier on, the King and the Queen arrived yesterday and last night to start the 4-day state visit, which should be commencing at State House. And let me begin on this, Chairman Koech. The significance of this at a time that the country is marking 60 years of independence, what is it? Extremely significant. Great honor that King Charles and Queen Camilla are visiting the country at this time. It should be remembered that when Queen Elizabeth was first rose to the throne, she was in Kenya, in Nyeri. It's extremely significant for them that they're back again visiting. This is the first country to the Commonwealth after King Charles took the throne. And that indicates the seriousness that the UK treats Kenya as an anchor state in the region. So that is extremely, extremely significant. The last time King Charles was here was in 1987. This country is a tourist destination. As we pride ourselves as a tourist destination, should tap onto this visit. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of excitement in the country that King Charles is visiting. And I'm sure as a country, in the conclusion of the trip, we will have achieved a lot. I will be enumerating later part of the things that King Charles is coming to discuss in this country. Besides. But I know, of course, people will mention about the painful past and history that we've had with Britain, for that matter. But I will not want that to cloud the bigger picture of his visit, the King's visit. Mm-hmm. For you, Senator, what is the significance of the visit?
First of all, let us put it into perspective. I think as among the countries, the Commonwealth nations, it is important that we have a visitor, a guest who was chosen to come to a country where the mother became queen. And I think back in 1952, when the mother was visiting this country, as my colleague has said, she learned of the death of her father. And immediately she became queen. So I think it is significant. King Charles became king last year. So within a year, he has chosen Kenya as the first country. Of course, there are mixed feelings about his visit. And some of them are historical. And a lot of, we cannot deny the fact that a lot of people are saying that he should offer an unequivocal apology for all the atrocities caused by the colonial masters. But at the same time, I look at it this way. This is a visitor coming. We are a very hospitable nation. You know, there are a lot of things that people will seek from his visit. You know, but it's important for them to know that he's a monarch. He brings in history. Of course, him going to Uhuru Garden and laying a wreath on the unknown warriors, what do you call them, soldiers who were killed, and also going to Mombasa to be able to visit different ethnic groups. It's significant. I think for us, we should look at his visit as one that we can be able to build more relations, not the painful relations that we had, you know. But sometimes I actually look at it and I say, the current administration or government makes the colonial masters look more like philanthropists, you know, because of the way they took over and the way they are carrying on issues and things on a daily basis. And when it comes to the issue of governance, I think it's a high time for us to take advantage of the fact that the UK went out of the European Union and became, you know, just stayed on, they had the Brexit. We need to benefit. If you go to London today, and I dare say even in his own house, you will find that you'll find some vegetables from Kenya. You know, I mean, the history is very deep. If you ask me that from a cultural perspective, from the Maasai, of course, recently my colleagues raised an issue which I completely support, that we need to talk about our painful history. If you go to the history of the Maasais, the Maasais never signed the independence papers. You know, our representatives walked out of the Lancaster House. You know, so we still feel like we are colonized within a nation. But the fact that they took these Commonwealth nations and they made them their significant partners is a true reality that they know how important we are. So what we should be seeking to get in the 21st century from the visit of King Charles, you know, who really you cannot blame for all the atrocities, you know, all the extremist measures which were brought towards our people, is corporations. You know, we need to be able to look at it. People talk about reparations. They talk about wanting to be paid for the atrocities. But ask yourself, you know, who fought for the independence? You know, is it only painful? Are we happy with what we're seeing in this country today that ties into our relations with the British? You know, so I think the key, most important thing for us to look at it is say, how do we build our relations with the king, with the United Kingdom? We want more of our students. Like if you ask me for the Maasai community, we've been crying. We lost most of our land. You know, we lost thousands of acres of land. You know, I don't want to dwell on that because right now I'm one of those people who normally say this country is owned 80% by foreigners. You know, if you go to Laikipia, it's owned by the British. If you go to northern Kenya, 80% of that county or those counties are owned by foreigners. So the truth is, what can we do? What can we benefit from his visit? King Charles is known as an environmentalist. You know, he's a person who had, I think when he was Prince Charles, he had so many charities. He was the president of all those charities. So the key issue is this: he's a true environmentalist. Let us look at it. We are going to be talking about the issues of environmental conservation. When we're talking about the issues of environmental conservation, you know, let it not be forgotten that people are suffering even until today. You know, we have things that we have not been able to resolve ourselves.
Right.
You know, I'm sure my brother Koech here will be able to attest to the fact that the conflict on Mau Forest is still something which is alive until today.
Absolutely.
You know, today we are fighting on the boundary. We had the Olentutu Commission that set up a particular cut line, you know, but because of interest, you know, today our people, our Maasai people, are being evicted out of the land. They sit there, they say, we are following the Olentutu boundary, we are being evicted. Some people like me would say the problem is because we removed another community which had encroached into our lands and territories, and now it is time for revenge. So the question to us during the king's visit, is it time for us to seek revenge and say, oh, you are bad to us or what? Or is it time for us to embrace each other and figure out and say, what can we benefit from each other? Can we increase trade between Kenya and the United Kingdom? Can we make sure that we have favorable trade agreements? This is an opportunity for us to show how hospitable we are and an opportunity for us to showcase, you know, our industrial nature of this nation.
All right.
So it is very, very important.
All right. For you, Brian, what are your expectations during this visit, and what's the most concerning thing for your organization?
I think, number one, we cannot talk about the visit without looking back at the bad history between Kenya and the UK government. So, number one, if you look at between 1899 to 1963, the political repression that was there, I mean, the kind of political situations that the Kenyans had to live in, from the Mau Mau, from the killings, hundreds of thousands of Kenyans were killed. So really, we cannot talk about that visit without going into those issues. Secondly, the issue of land alienation. A lot of Kenyans lost land, a lot of natives lost land, and a lot of areas were considered crown land, quote unquote, leaving many crown land, leaving many Kenyans or the original owners of this land deprived of their right to property or their right to land. And if you look at that history now, is something that, you know, looking at even the current situation of the land situation in Kenya, it's historical. If you look at, if you go to Kericho, the tea plantations there, these are land that were taken from communities such as the Talai, and to date they're deprived of this land. So really you can't talk about the king's visit without going into this dark past. Secondly, even to date, if you look at the some of these companies, British-owned companies that operate in Kenya, from the tea factories in Kericho, they still treat Kenyans as slaves. You saw the recent expose by BBC, where, I mean, before you get work, your workers are sexually exploited. So these are things we need to talk about.
But Brian, yes. Well, that has been reported. Where's the separation? Because, like the case you refer to, the offenders are Kenyans, not British.
But, of course, the offenders are Kenyans, but these companies are owned by the British, so they take the sole responsibility.
And then
these are agents of the company.
60 years later, and I hear you when you said that some bit of land was taken to be crown land and Kenyans were deprived of their right to property. But 60 years later, all those illegalities or evils are going to be resolved in a visit of 4 days? What is the plan?
No, we are not saying they're going to be resolved today or now. What we are saying is, at least let him acknowledge that something wrong happened. Let him offer an unconditional and unequivocal apology to Kenyans and to some of these, you see, some of these Mau Mau or some of these people who fought for independence are still alive. Let him apologize to them. Not this statement of regret that are neither here or there. That is not even African. A statement of regret is not an African term. Africans apologize. That is what we believe in. So the king should offer an unconditional and unequivocal apology to Kenyans.
For you, Honorable Koech, your thoughts about the conversation of the atrocities leveled against Kenyans in the during the colonial era. What should be the agenda at these 4 days and even in moving forward?
It is bad manners to receive a guest with questions that, in all fairness, do not point to them directly. King Charles was 15 years when we gained our independence. If there was any person we legitimately had to ask questions, was our mother, Queen Elizabeth. This is not the first time that King Charles is in Kenya. He's been here in the 70s almost 3 times. Actually attended Jomo Kenyatta's funeral. So it's not the first time that he's traveling to the country. Like he said, like Brian said, I come from Kericho, that today we're still living the wounds inflicted on our people by the British government and colony at that time. So the issues that, we are pressed for land, like Senator did mention before. We have a problem in Kericho. We can't even expand. We've been agonizing on what to do with the expansion. But I don't find it right at this time to ask King Charles about exactly what happened. And to just correct Brian, King Charles has acknowledged the atrocities that happened to the people of this country. But it's time to move on. There is a lot on the table in this visit. And I just want to highlight a few. There's going to be on the table, on this bilateral, there are going to be 42 billion Grand High Falls. There's going to be 12.5 billion Menengai geothermal project. There's going to be 7.5 billion Malindi solar expansion. There's going to be 11.5 billion Nairobi Railway. This I'm sure you are aware, it is about to start. There's going to be 31 billion United Green Investment, and of course the discussion on how this country can benefit by sending nurses to the UK. In fact, recently when I was in the UK, I met so many Kenyans who are working in the UK as nurses, and it's such a beautiful destination for Kenyans who want to work there as nurses and other careers as well. So there are so many things that are important that we can discuss with King Charles. I have seen his program and it's largely heavy. For us now to say we want to discuss about what happened and atrocities that were committed, I don't think it is the right time. I know the point is valid. I know people are hurt. I know there are people who really want compensation and apology. But I think let us look at it in a bigger, with a bigger lens. Okay. Number two, it is also important that King Charles has decided to come to this country. And as a country, we should tap. Initially, I had said that tourism is key in this country. The visitors that we get, tourists that visit Kenya mostly, we have a huge number of British citizens who are visiting this country to enjoy. This is that season that we should use this trip to harness and to make sure that we market Kenya adequately for the people out there to travel. So, I mean, there is so much to discuss and to look at in this visit, as much as I appreciate also the concerns of many people. Kericho, let me tell you, Sam, I live every day the pain of what was inflicted on our people. We have many colored people in Kericho. I think I'm actually part of the people who are problem. So there's women were raped, land was taken away, people were moved, and it is unfair. But the question will be, do we want to continue to engage on that, or should we move on?
We should talk about
former governor. We should talk about it. Former governor actually took them to court over all these atrocities. They are documented. Some are extremely painful, torture, and people still live with those scars of torture. And I think it is important for the UK government to recognize that there was a compensation that was awarded to Mau Mau, I think it was about 5 billion Kenyan shilling at that time. And there is more. So I think it's part of what we should discuss. But for this purpose of his visit, maybe it is also equally important to discuss. And just to mention also, we've continued to have very cordial relationship with the UK since we gained our independence. In fact, Jomo Kenyatta himself, who was detained painfully by the same British government, became their ally and made several trips in making sure that this country gets a resource and support from the UK. When Uhuru Kenyatta was elected in 2013, the first visit that he made out of the country was to the UK. When William Ruto was elected last general election, the first visit he made out of the country was to the UK. So UK has remained an ally to Kenya and continues to support Kenya programs.
Okay. I know, Senator, you want to make a contribution, but what is concern?
I think Honorable Koech has mentioned, I think he's saying this is not the right time. So I want to ask him, what is the right time? This is actually the right time to speak about it when he's here. Because, you know, if you look at the history between Kenya and the British government, number one, you know, these are people who killed, maimed Kenyans, raped Kenyans, buried some alive. Today, we don't even know where David Kimathi's body is. So really, when is the right time to speak about this? It's now. You can't speak about it when he's back to the UK. I mean,
okay.
I think for me, I would look at it as an opportunity for the king to appreciate, you know, and come close to the issues, the atrocities, the extreme measures against the locals. But I don't think it's a time for us to demand certain things to happen. And I believe during his visit here, you know, as king, remember what the Honorable Koech has said, that when, you know, he was too young by the time we were getting our independence. You know, I know for us, the Maasais, we are demanding and saying, hey, you know what, open up the Lancaster book again, let us sign for us to be able to feel like we are completely independent. But what is it that can be able to assist us today? Because truth be told, the British left this country a better place than they found it. When the British came here, we are nations among nations. You know, the Maasais was, you know, a big nation. You know, but for now, let us be realistic and say, when he was growing up, when the mother was queen, maybe we should have asked and demanded for a lot. What I'm saying now is this: we have problems for the Maasais of Tanzania, who are facing eviction on a daily basis. We have problems with the Maasais of Kenya, who are facing evictions from their land and territories on a daily basis. The time now is for us to think and sit down and say, what is it that can be done? If we are fighting for compensation, tell me, what is this compensation? Compensation, those court battles, is just a gimmick for lawyers to make money. Ask yourself, the 5,000 or the 10,000, I think there were 5,000 who got compensated. They got 2,600 quid, like 6,200 pounds. What is 2,600 pounds? On the pain. Most of the money went to the lawyers. So the fact is, what is it that we can do now? Can we try to negotiate for better education programs for our people? You know, can we tap on his interest? You know, the Honorable Koech has listed out a lot of different things that I think we need. One thing that we must make very clear in this country is that we are not beggars. Kenyans don't need to borrow money. Kenyans need an opportunity to be able to do business very well. You know, if you make it easier for us to do business, we can do better. When I was going to the UK the first time, I did not require a visa, you know, because it was part of the Commonwealth nation. I didn't require a visa. When we became independent, later I think the visas were introduced in the late 90s, you know, like, oh, maybe in the early 2000s. Right now, the issue for us to discuss and say, since the current occupier of State House is saying is opening Kenya for every African to visit, can we now say, since we have these close ties with the UK, can you reconsider doing away with the visas, you know, for us to be able to frequently visit the UK like we did in the past? Those are more progressive things to look at. If there's anything that we can do, that we can deal with right now, in Samburu, as an example, that Koech mentioned, Koech has mentioned the fact that there are so many innocent Kenyans who are raped, you know, who are maimed. In fact, yesterday I was seeing on social media, or maybe the mainstream media, we were saying that some people who were coming out to voice their frustrations were being locked in. Don't. Let them allow the king to appreciate the pain that these Kenyans have gone through. Then we sit down on the table and say, gentlemen, what can we do to be able to solve our problem? We know we cannot completely heal your pain, but we can help you cope with it. It is like somebody who is terminally ill. Mm-hmm. Most of us are terminally ill, my brother. Most of us, our lands and territories were taken away. You know, every so often, we have conflict. How do you think I feel when one person, one foreigner, you know, owns 100,000 acres of land? You know, how do you think I feel when I know that is my land? That is my ancestral land. I feel painful. But what can we do to negotiate grazing rights? You know, we all know that we leave all these things on this earth. So the most important thing is to say, we have a visitor coming. We are very happy. You know, there are still so many countries like Jamaica which still consider the king as the head of state. You know, we are independent. We have our own head of state. A lot of those countries, if the king would have visited those countries today, the first thing they would have been calling for is for their own independence, you know, because they are still not independent. Mm-hmm. So let us put our priorities right. The biggest problem we have right now, and building from what we have done this year, is the issue of the environment. You know, he's a darling. You know, even the mother had a Queen Forest program. Can we tap into that now that he is a true environmentalist? Can we partner with them to be able to plant billions of trees to improve our environment? Can we talk about carbon credit? You know, that can be able to support, you know, Senator, the local people? I'm wondering,
I hear you, especially on that, the charity side that the British monarchy has been propagating over time. But then again, if you look at the separation of roles and powers in the UK, you have the head of government as the Prime Minister and, of course, the King as the head of state. So are there limits to these conversations, especially when you hear Chairman Koech here highlighting some of the projects that are being done? Are there limits? Because
I don't believe they are.
Executive.
Let me put it this way. I don't believe they are. Mm. The King holds a very special place in the history of the United Kingdom. Yeah. You know? And for him to come and appreciate, you know, he would be able to go to number 10 down the street. Mm-hmm. And have a conversation with the Prime Minister and say, I visited Kenya, you know, I went, I saw the graves of the unknown soldiers who fought for the World War, you know, I visited Kenya, I went to Mombasa, I met with all these communities, you know, I visited Kenya and I was able to face the reality. I saw the challenges that country has. You know, the British, the monarchy, holds Kenya in a very high regard. You know, the mother became queen in this country. They hold it in high regard. So I don't believe there are limits. I think we should open up conversation. We should be more positive. Let us find a way for us to be able to have a win-win solution. You know, truth be told, if it wasn't that they never probably thought of the population growth in this country, maybe Nairobi would have been one of the best cities in the world. because of the way they designed it. In fact, the plans that they had is maybe the plans that Sakaja should be talking about now, putting putting a subway into the city. They had those plans before, you know. So really, we need to look at where we've come with them. Yes, it is painful, you know, and we have to be honest with each other and face the reality and say, our forefathers, our grandparents suffered. They paid dearly, you know, and so did, you know, everyone in the world. The World War II. There are so many things that came into the World War II. So can we be able to narrow down and say we can benefit with this visit by, first of all, being hospitable? We are a hospitable nation. I want more British to come to the Masai Mara, you know. I want to have more direct flights from the UK to Kenya. I think the British nations, seeing that the king has chosen Kenya as the first place to come and visit, although I know during his visit today, he will not be going to Nanyuki, which is very important to them, but the fact that he has come to Kenya, we want to bring more visits. Then we can now quietly, diplomatically start discussing about this issue of handing over these lands, slowly by slowly, to our people, you know, and being honest with it. Because the truth be told, if you look at the fight on Kedong, you know, there are so many Masais who are massacred there. Ololonga, there are so many Masais who are massacred there. But when the colonial masters left, did they hand over that land back to the people? Yes, they did. But what happened? Our greedy politicians at that time allocated themselves those lands, you know. Did the truth be told, and we need to be very factual and be honest, you know, the Kikuyu suffered a great deal, you know, but when we took independence, was the leadership then given money to compensate or given land to compensate their own people who suffered? Yes, they were given. Did they keep it to themselves? Yes, they kept to themselves. So really, we cannot blame the monarchy for everything. They left.
Right.
It is us and our stupidity that made us become corrupt the way we are, to a point where today we are still saying we want compensation, we want compensation. And when that compensation comes, it's some greedy 2, 3, or 4 people who take all that money. It's ludicrous.
And therefore the question, and I'll get to you, Chairman, but Brian, tell me, because the essence of government is that they exist in perpetuity. I don't know if it's fair to say that the government of Kenya succeeded the colonial government. Actually, it is, because that's the reality. But then again, 60 years later, there has been a government of Kenya, independent Kenya, and some of these atrocities have not been resolved. Why should we be expecting the head of state of another country, despite the history, to be the one to resolve them, while the solution can actually be found locally?
Actually, let me just give you a background of this issue. The KHRC, when we supported the Mau Mau to take this matter to the UK courts, one of the issues they raised, initially, in fact, for us even to get to compensation level, there are a lot of preliminary objections that they raised. And one of the issues that they raised, one of the grounds that they used is state succession. They were saying, now we are out of Kenya. I mean, you guys sort yourselves out. But you have to look at the original sin. Where did it start? It was them. They are the original sinners. So even these issues that my colleague, Senator Olekina, is talking about, I mean, our politicians becoming greedy and grabbing this land and not even compensating the freedom fighters or the people who deserved to be compensated. It's because of the original sin. So they have to take responsibility for that. So they can't.
How do you make that happen? Because the land is not in the UK, it's still in Kenya.
Yes. So I think, number one, what we're demanding for, at least, at the very least, is an equivocal and unconditional apology from the king. Secondly, we're also demanding, because you see even the monies that the Mau Mau got, and even there are so many others that have not been compensated, including the group that comes from Kericho, where my colleague Koech comes from. So these are groups that at least need to get some reparation. They need to be paid. They need to be compensated for this.
Chairman, so when you look at I mean, the definition of roles, like I asked Senator Ledama here, between the king or the monarch and the prime minister. I mean, the king has no executive role. Is it as easy as saying that the king can call the prime minister and tell him what he witnessed in Kenya? Is it as easy as that?
Indeed, every single day in the UK, the king is briefed by the prime minister.
Of government, yes.
Every single day. So, I mean, it's part and parcel of governance.
I'm asking about, can he give instructions to the prime minister legally within the UK system, I want you to do 1, 2, 3, 4.
Not in that sense. I am sure even in the course of the briefing, in the course of the engagement out of the country is not in vain. The engagement out of the country is even though it does not have direct relation with governance, I am sure he is involved in every single day's running of the government of the UK, and any bilaterals then that are signed, I am sure he's briefed of. And at the same time, if he declines on a particular support, I am very certain that it won't happen. So it is a very necessary pillar for any engagement outside the country in the UK, and is respected as such in the UK. It cannot have been in vain, and I think that we should see it in that view. But I also want to take over from where Senator Lekina said on atrocities that were committed in this country. There are many things that have happened that we will not forget. Dedan Kimathi's body, to date, no one knows where he was buried. Those are some of the artifacts and videos in black and white that the country has continued to request. You know, the body of course, and also what happened to Koitalel Samoe, and many other. I mean, there's just so much documented history. And because these are the people colonizers, there is so much that has happened in between. But look at other countries in the Commonwealth that were equally colonized by the UK, and what has happened? Has there been compensation, for instance? Has there been talk of, you know, of getting an apology? So we look at it from that dimension. Let us also, at the same time, look at the benefits that these countries have continued to get. Like Mheshimiwa Lekina was saying, in fact, if they had stayed longer, maybe we'll have had a better city, a well-planned Nairobi. They're coming back again years after, 60 years after, to do for us a railway, a city railway that is going to support the infrastructure and transport within the city. As we are talking now, my committee is involved in looking at serious atrocities that have been committed to the people of Samburu and Laikipia, and the county governments of Laikipia and Samburu have petitioned the UK government over the British Army training unit officers in Lanet, that is Batuk, no, rather in Nyanyuki. And even environmental degradation, you know, Lekina is an environmentalist. He's very passionate about conservation of environment, only to the extent that it touches on the Kipsigis. Beyond that, he keeps
Come on. No. That is not fair. That is absolutely not fair.
So let me say this. So there has been a lot that has been happening. And we shouldn't look at it only pre-independence. There are so many other atrocities that are happening, even with the soldiers, the British Army soldiers in Kenya currently. So like I told you, we are opening an inquiry shortly. It was in the paper, and we shall be looking at those atrocities, and we will deal with them. We will come up with a report. It has nothing to do with Prince Charles, but as a committee, I think we have the will, we have the wherewithal to make sure that we can come up with a very good proposal on how to settle such disputes. The British Army, I just noticed that King Charles actually will be traveling to Mtongwe to look at the Mtongwe Naval Base. We have the Royal Naval Officers training our own officers. Those are some of the gains that this country are tapping from the UK.
Right.
And I think those are some of the important areas as well that we should focus on. So largely, this trip, a mixed reaction from different people, depending on how you look at it, but that does not in any way cloud our past that they colonized us, our past that we still live with the wounds, and the past that we still feel like we should be compensated, and a past that we feel like there should be an apology from the UK.
There has been that very never-ending question about the remains of Dedan Kimathi. There's the conversation that we just mentioned there about Koitalel Arap Samoei. Is there any action that has been taken to, because I mean, leaders, including senior ones, speak at different events and say, we want to know where he was buried. Has there been a deliberate attempt to really find out, especially to those that were in charge of governance in Kenya?
In diplomacy, you don't scream. You do it very quietly. Sometimes you negotiate, sometimes you talk about it. I don't understand why the UK still holds, even to mention where the bodies are, or even hold some artifacts that belong to the people of this country. That's our history. For as painful as they might be, I think it is important for them to release some of those artifacts and even let the country know if indeed Dedan Kimathi was buried in Kenya or elsewhere. The family.
That's what I'm asking. Has there been
country.
an express request? Because you said diplomacy.
I am aware of quiet diplomacy that has been ongoing to make sure that some of the things are released.
Formally?
Formally, yes.
And what has been the response?
I don't know the response.
Let me just add in a little bit of what my colleague is saying here. I think it's important for us to ask ourselves where this country is going to be in the next 100 years. Is history important? Absolutely. Should we be having a discussion with the British on how they can be able to return back our history, our ornaments that they have in their museums back to Kenya? Yes. Are we ready to receive them? Maybe not. We might just make a huge hula baloo about them, but then when they come here, they become insignificant. I think the other way to look at it is this way. How can we benefit with those artifacts, the history, being kept in the UK? Maybe we should start negotiating with the museum there to be able to say we are setting up a huge fund for everyone who visit here. We can keep some money away. Then we can be able to start King Charles Scholarship Fund or the British Scholarship Fund to support Kenyans. I want to see more Maasai students going abroad. I want to see more Kipsigis young girls and boys going abroad. And I just want to correct my brother here. I'm a conservationist from my toe all the way to the last hair that I have. So it doesn't go to the boundary. We only talk about the issues of Mount Forest, and we have to be candid and to be honest with each other when we're talking about that. So the issue is this. Is it painful for some people to see the head of the UK, the head of state, coming into this country and maybe their families are still suffering? Yes. But let's take this opportunity, to be able to ensure that at least those families will be remembered. They can be considered. My brother talks about an unconditional and unequivocal apology. So what? I'm sorry. So what? When we were growing up, we used to be told, sorry, destroyed all the cutleries of the British, because every time you drop, you say, sorry, it destroyed. I think the key most important thing is for us to say, how can we benefit? And I want to reiterate the fact that, number one, we have issues of, foreigners owning huge chunks of lands, in Laikipia. People are evicted on a daily basis. And when they're evicted, all these lands, huge. Are those people benefiting, unnecessarily? Yes, they are. Should our people also start benefiting? Absolutely. Should we have this conversation? But is it fair for us to point all our daggers on the monarch when he's coming? No, it's not. Because for over 60 years, we'll soon be celebrating 60 years. And mind you, the British monarchy hold this country in very high esteem. I'm aware that a fortnight ago, they had a big celebration at King Charles's Palace to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Kenyan independence.
Right.
So that means they value this country. So we need to ask ourselves, our women, he cares about women. He does a lot of programs on women. Should we now be looking and saying, how do we empower our women? How do we support our women? To ensure that our women also in leadership are protected. That is very, very important, because nowadays, when you see a woman being very powerful, you attack her. It's not fair. We should learn. So the issue is, what can we benefit? Can we build our relations? Can we extend our relations? I think King Charles is a fair gentleman. We'll be able to come in and see, and they will have that conversation.
Right.
I have visited some farms in Wales. And one of the things that I admire the most about King Charles is that he supports organic farming. He supports what? Organic farming. Here in this country, I would probably say I'm one of the few who also venture into organic farming. Maybe when he comes back, we should now be talking about how do we improve a lot of organic farming. How do we make sure that we have our local honeys? There's a rag estate in the Wales, and the gentleman who owns that estate, they're very good friends with King Charles. I've been there, seen what they are doing. how he recognized that. So really, let's look at what is within his purview for us to be able to benefit. Let us be hospitable. Let it go down the history and say, the King Charles, his first visit to Kenya was hospitable. He was visited well. We had casual conversation. We had discussions, and see how can we make it better. I think in everything that we do, my brother, we should be future-centric. We should say, how is it going to benefit the future generation?
Okay.
I always keep on saying that in 100 years, none of us will be here. Probably Citizen TV will not be here. Maybe news will be read from the satellites or something like that. But for now, can we then think about that 100 years with a history so that we make our history a better place? Every single day should be a day that we look forward to improving our relations with our neighbors, even with our enemies. I know Koech always talks about me not loving the Kipsigis. Trust me, I love the Kipsigis. They are my voters, and I'm sure in future they will also be voting for me, even if they have not voted for me twice. But in future, I'm pretty sure they will say, this guy, we are trying to destroy him to Meshindo. That's what it's idea.
Okay.
So really.
Interesting. Senator, out of curiosity, you've lived in the UK?
Yes, I have.
For how long?
I used to work for European Business News. I used to work in the summers. I was there in the summers. I lived in the US. But every summer, I would go to the UK. I worked for a company called Diverse Production. And every summer, I would work there and raise money to pay for my school fees in America.
I'm just wondering, where's the accent?
No.
Brian, tell me, because there was that promise in 2013 of things that were to be done. Of course, the compensation that he says that much of it went to the lawyers, but also memorizing and immortalizing, rather, the history of what may have happened. How well has the British government done in respecting that settlement?
Number one, I think it's important to acknowledge the Mau Mau were compensated. Secondly, there's a monument that was built. But now in terms of maintenance of this monument, the KHRC has been part and parcel of this, trying to spend a lot of money in maintaining this monument. So really, after they built the monument, it was just left there. So the Kenya government does nothing about it. It is the Mau Mau Foundation and ourselves, the KHRC, that ensures that this monument is maintained. And so...
What was the agreement of maintenance?
You see, after building, I cannot really talk about what the agreement was. But after building the monument, it was left at that. So in terms of maintenance, in terms of how improvements and all that, nothing happened after that.
Who should do it?
Ideally, it should be them.
But it's in Kenya.
It is in Kenya, but they're the ones who committed these atrocities. Why are Kenyans taking, taking that expense again?
Koech, are you convinced? Because if the commitment was to build that monument and to settle compensation to the Mau Mau veterans, beyond that, where's the onus? Is it the government of Kenya, the government of the UK, or
Mau Mau?
Mau Mau stroke KHRC?
Sam, what probably we should look at is how much is worth what we suffered during the colonial period. How much can they compensate? What are we looking for as a country? Is it monetary? Is it an apology? There's no money that can pay for the pain that the people, the patriots who we lost and those who got scars from colonialism is worth paying for. Mm-hmm. It is a token just to say, we wronged you and this is what we can give you. And I don't think you can quantify how much that should be. Mm. So I really don't know what happened to the money the compensation that came, the 5 billion that was given out. I'm told that the lawyers took a good part of that. Yesterday, during our vetting of ambassadors and my committee, one, Mr. Chege, he's the father-in-law of Mr. Marco Goye, attended one of our sessions. Mm-hmm. And it's evident that most of the people who fought for independence were not properly compensated. We're very keen to look at pre-colonial Kenya, yet we don't want to look at post-colonial Kenya. In fact, after the real colonialism from the UK, then came the Kenyan colonialists, quote unquote, who now took over land from the Mau Mau, took over land from the people who fought for our independence and never cared to compensate or to even allocate them land for that matter. Is it fair, for instance, to have watched very painfully the late Mau Mau, the wife of Dedan Kimathi, die very painfully and permanently seeking for help to be bailed out of our hospital bills? Was that right as a country? So even as we critique the UK, even as we welcome King Charles, even as we feel like there are so many things that we would have liked to ask King Charles, let us ask ourselves as a country that 60 years after independence, what have we done as a country to the people who fought for independence of this country? They still are living in horrible states. People are poor. People don't have medical access. The old that are remaining.
That should be on the government of Kenya.
It should be on the government of Kenya. It is unfair. That's why this debate of talking about looking at the UK is just clouding the real issues. People have continued to suffer. Ladema has told you there are people who still own thousands and thousands of acres. There are Kenyans who, when we took over independence, decided that no, it is our time to eat and took over land of the other freedom fighters. We have, actually you can name the freedom fighters who even have property. The rest died horribly. And those are people we should be honoring.
Okay.
Why have we changed even the dates? I mean, when we look at the national dates that we have in this country, this, Jamhuri Day or Utamaduni Day, I don't know which other days, do you hear the names of the real freedom fighters? Do you still hear the names of the people who really worked hard? Do you even remember who hoisted the Kenyan flag in Mount Kenya? If I may just ask. People have forgotten, but the people who have money are the people who are recognized, the people who will vote to be president, exactly. The people who have, who tormented post-colonial, who have tormented the freedom fighters. Let us not also look beyond what has happened. There are people who own land in this country. Let us look at that first of all before we go to the UK. They have tormented the people of this country. Should we seek an apology from them? That today, for instance, in Nyeri, the freedom fighters are, put in some slums. You have someone, for instance, almost owning half of Nakuru County, and you want to say we are talking about the UK and not talking about the Kenyan freedom fighters, people who have not been compensated. The king is actually going to visit some of the graves. We have some in Ngong Sanctuary here, World War II graves. We've never done that as a country. We've never honored the guys who we sent out to fight for us. So there's just so much within our country. Even after independence, we've continued.
Just allow me.
I wanted to hear from Brian first, then I get.
I don't want to forget what my brother said. Just allow me to come in. I think my brother Koech raises a very significant issue that we cannot ignore. Let me put it this way. Today, I heard him talking earlier on about a commission, or rather they're working on a report. His committee is working on a report. But should we ask ourselves whether this report should just collect dust? Today our people, the Maasais, are suffering.
Absolutely.
In Olokurto. And when you go there, yesterday I sent my entire team to go there and carry out due diligence because I like to dwell on things that I have facts on. We went to dwell on due diligence. Then they found elders who were sitting there and saying, when the Olentutu Commission came, this is where they put the boundary. Okay? Some of them even say that the problem is this. Because we are here and the Nyayo T-zones are here, we are also, you know what? We also will also be buried along with the T-zone. So the problem is this. Are we only looking at what happened to this country, the problems which were caused by the British? Are we also, or are we also, should we not look at what is happening currently in this country?
Okay.
Should we be sort of like, careful on how we treat our citizens? And I want to plead with the current administration that my people are suffering. I think it is not fair for you to point guns at our people who are helpless, who see you as a danger. Sit down and have a conversation with them. Ask yourself whether these people, who are the original inhabitants of that land, the indigenous people, Do they have a right? You know, the Honorable Koech has said, it is not fair that freedom fighters live in slums in Nyeri. You know, I dare say also that it is not fair that the inhabitants, the Ndorobo, the Maasais, who lived, you know, on the boundaries of the Mau forest.
The Kipsigis.
Yeah, and some Kipsigis, of course. You know, definitely. You know, and I'm always saying that if you have encroached, it doesn't matter which tribe you come from, if you have encroached into the forest, you have no right being there.
Right.
You know, you have to leave. But there are people who were born there. There are people who are buried there. I want to plead with this administration. You know, just like everybody is saying that they want an unequivocal, unconditional apology from the king, so do we. We also want an unequivocal and unconditional apology to the atrocities, you know, to the extreme measures against our people. So the issues that we have on land, can we resolve them? Let me be very candid here. What happened in Movoko is not something good. It is wrong. It is wrong for people to use the judiciary to be able to get certain orders, interpret them the way they want, expertise order, and to go and destroy properties, homes of people. They may not have bungalows. They may not have 20,000 acres of land, 10,000 acres of land. They may not have money to be elected as leaders. You know, they may not be known by anybody, but they are human beings. Let's treat them as human beings first. Kenyans are suffering. And right now, during these economic challenges that we're facing, you know, you go there and you destroy a small hut, you burn it. That is that person's life.
Right.
You know, that is their person, that is their future. So I think what we need to do is to really sit down and ask ourselves tough questions. Are we doing the right thing by sending the entire police force, because nowadays I don't call it police service, it's the police force, to go in and burn homes and stuff like that? Is it right? Is it good to revenge? If you feel like maybe when Ledama and everybody else was fighting to evict people from the Mau forest, you know, it was not right. Now it's time for us to revenge and kick out the Maasais. It's not fair.
Okay. Brian, I needed you to clarify, because different figures have been cited, including this morning hearing of 5 billion shillings. Well, the record would show something different. How much was it, and how was it shared between the real veterans versus the lawyers?
Okay, number one, I can't really speak authoritatively on that, or how much the lawyers got, but in terms, I can only speak to how much the veterans got. Then another thing that we need to debunk here is this. Number one, as KHRC, we did not, we were part of this case. We did not ask the Mau Mau veterans for any money. This is monies that we actually, even to date, we spend out of our own pocket as the commission to fund the activities from, I think this, next week we are launching a website for the Mau Mau veterans. These are monies that KHRC is spending on the veterans. So ideally, when that compensation was being done, there was a list of Mau Mau war veterans that was used to compensate them.
You said you can speak to the figures.
Sorry?
You said you can speak to the figures. I'm waiting for it.
for the figures, I said I couldn't speak about the figures.
No, you said you can speak about what Mau Mau veterans got.
Yeah, that one I can't speak on. Probably I can. I'm not really sure. I can't comment.
Okay.
On that.
I think to be sure, because we've been following on these things.
Yeah.
Those who were compensated, and I believe there were 5,000 of them, each one of them was given £2,600. And if you add 2,000, 6,000 times 5,000, gives you about 13, is it 12? 12 million pounds. And the total amount was 25 million pounds. So maybe the people got 13 million pounds and the lawyers got 12 million pounds. I mean, it is, lawyers will always get 50% of what you get, really. That's exactly what they got.
Okay. Unfortunately, he's not able to clarify that. I'm just looking at the exchange rate of 2013. It was about 143 in December of that year. So 2,600 would get to 371,000 shillings. I don't know if that's sufficient compensation for fighting for this country. But we fight every day. Of course, not in a manner that it would be anything close to the fight for the independence of this country. And I want us to take a look at the feedback that Kenyans have been sharing on X at Citizen TV Kenya, at Sam Gituku. The hashtag to use is daybreak, as we wait for the start of the official visit, of the state visit rather. Rev Harry, you're saying that although the visit is good for our country, he should speak something about those issues mentioned. God bless you, Kenya. Sir Nixon, it's good that the president has made deals for us out there. Deals work best when each side practically gets something it wants from the other. Let's just cross our fingers for most deals fall out, no matter how promising they seem at first. Okay? Babu Michael, the visit of King Charles and Queen Camilla should be viewed in a positive way, but not in a negative way. The influence globally can't be ignored in any way. I am sure, though most Kenyans got tough questions to be addressed, the visit will benefit Kenya. Engineer Lazaro, I think Kenyans should only be concerned with the regime, foreign policies, and what we are gaining from it, not President's several trips abroad. He may be traveling out to seek his personal medical attention. We shouldn't be petty. Wow, okay. I don't know about that. Peter, you're saying that Kenyans suffered during the colonial era. The royal visit should make our country partner with the UK in terms of developmental agenda. So that's just a look at what Kenyans are saying. I just want to take you through what the king is expected to do in the country. The Majesties will be greeted in Nairobi with a ceremonial welcome at State House and will each attend bilateral meetings, the King with the President and the Queen with the First Lady, before the President hosts a state banquet at State House. His Majesty will visit the UN office at Nairobi, UNON, to learn more about the work of the UN Habitat and UN Environment Program. And UNON is the only UN headquarters in the Commonwealth. His Majesty will attend a technology showcase meeting, meeting Kenyan entrepreneurs who are driving forward innovation in the country's technology sector. Kenya has the third largest startup ecosystem in Africa. The King will also host a reception focused on Kenya's young people and future leaders across development, trade, media, the creative arts, and environmental conservation. The Majesties will visit a Commonwealth War Graves Commission cemetery, joining British and Kenyan military personnel in an act of remembrance, before hearing about the Commission's recent work to ensure all those who supported Britain's efforts in both the World Wars are commemorated. The King and Queen will visit Nairobi National Park. Her Majesty, patron of the Equine Welfare Charity Brook, will hear how the charity is working with the Kenya Society for the Protection and Care of Animals to rescue donkeys at risk and promote their welfare. The King, as Captain General of the Royal Marines, and the Queen will visit Mtongwe Naval, that is in Mombasa. There, their Majesties will witness Kenyan Marines trained by the Royal Marines demonstrating a covert beach landing and showing defense collaboration in action. That should be in Mombasa. And the Queen will meet survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, learning how they are supported and sharing how her own insights from working in this area. And then the King will meet faith leaders from Mombasa's diverse community, hearing how they are working together to promote harmony amongst the city's population. So that's the sort of agenda that was shared by the British High Commission or the UK government on the visit of the King to Kenya. That's the agenda. I don't know whether it encompasses all the things that we've been speaking about this morning, but these are the concerns some of Kenyans have. I want to thank you all, Senator Ledamo Lekina, for making time for us, Brian Olang from Kenya Human Rights Commission, and Nelson Koech from the Foreign Affairs Committee, and also the Member of Parliament for Belgut. That's our time to have this conversation. The royal visit coverage kicks off shortly. Stay tuned.